One. Yay! Okay.
Oh.
So, hi there. This is the redoing of my famous philosophy class that I did like last year. But yeah, basically this is pop psychology, philosophy, and RPing, and how we look at writing concepts and all these things, and how that affects how we RP, how we communicate with each other, and how we write, and all these things. So today I wanted to start with something easy. I wanted to talk about this guy named Joseph Campbell who wrote this idea of the monomyth and why the monomyth is important with terms of writing and stuff like that. This is going to be a series. I'm going to talk about a couple other people. I'm going to talk about Hannah Arendt in another class. And I'm going to talk about Immanuel Kant. I'm going to talk about a little bit of Machiavelli. I'm going to talk a little Hobbes. I'm going to talk a little about contracts and a little bit about concepts of like human nature, human conditioning, some analysis, political science, philosophy, different things, literature, feminist theory, career theory, English theory, and a lot of different little things that I think is actually really interesting when we talk about RPing. Like my background in this is that I was a college student for 4 years, and I did a lot of random stuff for a good while. And one of my things was writing on film, and film I figured out has a lot of things to do with RPing. Same with video games and literature and different things. So I wanted to, yeah, I just wanted to focus on a couple things. And so, without further ado, let's talk about the monomyth. Who knows what the monomyth is? Anyone?
Nope.
Okay, the monomyth is this idea by Joseph Campbell that there is one huge sort of. The monomyth is a singular idea. It's basically that there is one key story at the center of all literature, ideas, and something like that, and it's not something in the book called "The Hero of a Thousand Faces," and it's this idea that all stories come from a single myth, and it's called the monomyth, which is the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is your basic outline for any story. You can literally pinpoint. You can literally put every story into separate little boxes and just go click monomyth, 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 and then you have monomyth. Um, and so when you have things like the monomyth happen, you kind of get into the whole concept of what is this monomyth? What is this idea of the singular identity? So basically, what the hero journeys is that the hero gets something called a call. The call for adventure, the call for whatever. They get summoned to do some quest. You do a quest, you do a task, whatever. You go on a journey to do this task. You can refuse the call, and it'll just keep dragging you. It's the whole this concept of free will and fate and destiny, which is also really fun. I'm going to do something on free will and destiny after this. Next class will be about free will, destiny, the idea of character, and Pygmalion, actually. I like this. My Pygmalion class is really fun. So, Monomyth. Back to the idea. You go on a journey, whatever, and you're fighting a sword. You have a sword. Let's just do with your little sword. And then you're driving, and then you go boop. And then you have to fight things, and then you have to stop things, and you have to do things. You have to be active, and you have to do things. And then you get into these tasks and trials, and you learn from these trials, and you learn from different things. This is character growth, by the way, where you go and you learn, and you learn, and you learn, and you fight, and then you die, or you get hurt, or something bad, really bad happens to you. The third act, the crazy climax, conflict, etc., etc. And then you learn something, you survive, you get out of the trial, you get out of the conflict and the combat, and then you come back to your homeland to bring knowledge back with you. It's always a quest about knowledge, even if it's like a holy grail. The Holy Grail. And you can literally go into any story and you can pinpoint the different parts. I'm not going to go into the 9 steps or whatever, but basically you can just go in and put in slot by slot by slot. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, the Bible, Gilgamesh, King Arthur, everything has these little like boom, 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 boom myth. You always will have the single myth. Hey, Dino.
Hey, why is this live? What's going on? What's going
I'm
on? I
doing,
just saw a link.
Dino, I'm doing my pop philosophy class. That you were kind of the person I got the idea from.
Oh, yeah!
I've been waiting
Welcome.
for you too.
I just saw the link and I was like, Hangouts! Yes!
Yes, I'm glad you actually came. I'm been talking. Today's the Campbell talk. So I'm talking about the monomyth.
I just choked.
Good idea. Okay, so the whole concept of the monomyth relates from this idea that you have this one story. And you have this one story, and you're always going to tell this one story. And so that's where you have, say, let me go for an example of Harry Potter. So, how does things like Harry Potter and those kind of like myths of singular identities reflect into RP? So, this is going to be a little bit more interactive than I usually do my classes. So I want you guys to think about this. How do you develop your characters in RP? Just through plotting, through movement, through posts. How do you usually go? Because everyone usually has a certain story they're really good at. I've always noticed this about RPers in my 10-something years, in my 5 years of actually analyzing and looking at RPs, which is a part of the class, is learning how to analyze RP writing. So I want to hear from you guys. What are some of the ways and stories and kind of concepts that you guys kind of are good at, get at, and we'll kind of roll from there. We'll talk about this whole philosophy of story building, and I guess that's basically the class. It's the philosophy of story building today. Okay. So how do they deal with that? Okay. So, when you come with the monomyth, a fun one with trust issues I've always gone to is if Warehouse 13. I think that's because I've been watching it a lot lately. I'm gonna go through Warehouse 13 as my thing about monomyth and things like I'm literally pointing out just shot the narrative where a lot of the characters have major trust issues, which is like spy things. And oh hush, Lily, I see you skyping me. I see you skyping me. I've been watching the show. You jerk. Jerk. Okay, so monomyth. All these characters have kind of these trust issues and personality issues and development. They kind of go through their own personal monomyths in how to fight the things. Another one, basically all having this thing I call this Zuko. Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one, yeah. I like that one. But yeah, you have learning. They learn from it. Actually, my favorite ever personalized version of this is from the Avatar Last Airbender with Zuko. Zuko is the textbook monomyth. He is textbook. And you even have things like the face he'll turn. You have all these things where he's on a quest. He literally. That's actually one of my favorite things at The Last Airbender, actually. The main character is usually not Aang, it's Zuko. At least in terms of Campbell speak. Because he's the one that's going on the hero's journey. He's getting sent on a mission. He has to do trials, he has to do challenges, he has to learn. And then the challenges and trials he faces none of them are really that much external. They're all internal. Shame, guilt, deceit, destruction, self-destruction, self-pity, self-annihilation. Well, yeah, self-hatred. And so he has to learn to not do that. And then he even does the traditional hero's journey. You go 1 forward, 5 steps back, and then redeems himself. Which is he actually goes textbook, and it's kind of amazing to watch. And you see this sometimes in RPs. We kind of fall back to it without ever really thinking about it. And so that was kind of where I wanted to go with it. And that's just one aspect of storytelling Campbell-esque novelization I find in RPs, because every character kind of goes on their own journey. That's usually how characters are made. Characters are written. Story matters. Goals matter. Or you're just... I mean, some people do it for whatever, masturbation material. But most people do it because they like reading. They like seeing these characters and seeing them just kind of roll through these things, challenges. And you can have a Wooby of having a billion challenges just tossing them, or you can have a Pollyanna who just smiles and moves through it. And this is where I actually wanted to jump into something else. Okay, here's familiar with Aristotle. Philosopher, Aristotle.
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay. Aristotle wrote basically the rules of theater. It's actually kind of cool. No one really thinks about this, but theater, film, all these things are run by the rules of Aristotle. Well, does it? Yeah, my signal isn't that good. I'm sorry, but okay. He basically created what we know, at least in terms of genre. He invented genre. Aristotle basically wrote that there are two genres in basically theater. There's drama and there's comedy. Drama is you are fighting through your problems. You actively fight through your problems. And that's kind of where tragedy and all these different little things come from. They come from this idea of drama, that you must overcome, you must fight. While comedy is running from your problems. You are ignoring them. You are creating farce. You are basically pushing your problems to becoming non-entities. Drama is seen as the more noble pursuit. Comedy is seen as the more lighter pursuit. And you see that stereotype still prevalent today. It's not a pure comedy that wins an Oscar, it's a dramedy. Or an Emmy, well, they have their own categories, but because that's how we view theater, that's how we view art. You either fight through your problems or you run, fight, flight, you either create or concept. And so that's another thing you see with RPers and RPing. You either create a comedic character that doesn't really face a lot of problems, per se, or just ignores the world around them, or just kind of like pushes things away, trolls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically pulls away from the main action. The aside, the Porter character. Or you have the drama, which is growth, which is concept, which is fighting, which is having to struggle and suffer. And you can have everything from suffering porn to just someone who's so bullheadedly summoned that they just fight through every wall in front of them. And so that's what you kind of get with a lot of RPs. You just get these kind of like conflicts between comedy and dramatic. How do you basically try to pull back and kind of ignore the pain for a moment and then kind of move through it?
I have to say, I'm kind of an oddball, where I'll have my sort of dramatic characters get involved in funny, odd situations at times. Just with other people's comedic characters, just like, okay, last thread, my main character was like crying and going through horrible stuff, and then she's just feeling better and walks into a room, and oh well, the floor is wet and she falls face first into a birthday cake. It's not funny for my character, but it's funny for me.
Okay. Yep. And that's kind of like how comedic characters kind of work. There's just a lot of you try to basically ignore all the craziness in the world, and you just kind of keep moving. And that's kind of one of the big aspects of, I guess, theater in itself. And because that's kind of like what we realize that we kind of forget. Because one of the big bases of how I'm doing this class is I'm using a lot of film theory, because a lot of film theory also kind of works with RPs. Because usually how the philosophy of reading film, literature, TV, theater, etc., how those kind of work is that a lot of these things are small reflections upon ourselves as people. that characters and ideas and concepts are separate from the writer and separate from the author and separate from us, but also combined to us. There are our psyches or consciousness or subconsciousness, our id, ego, all that, Freudian, all that stuff. Basically, what is written on the paper, our imaginations, our music, etc., are also very much a reflection upon ourselves and our own styles, our own writings, and our own knowledge, and our own everything. Basically, yeah, character, person.
And then thus comes the debate on the art versus the artist and separation between both.
So, a key concept I'm going to be talking about a lot in this class is going to be this idea of RPing as a sadomasochistic art. Yeah, it comes from Laura Mulvey. She wrote this concept called the male gaze. She kind of is the queen of creating film theory. She was a huge feminist scholar in the 1960s and 70s, and she basically wrote the book of film theory, what we now know as film theory.
What was that name again?
Laura Mulvey.
Hmm.
She's kind of important when you discuss film studies, TV studies, and all these kinds of things.
Yeah,
Okay.
the last name.
When you see Mulvey, you know exactly what people are talking about. Parks and Rec actually did a whole episode on her. So, what Laura Mulvey did was write basically this concept called the male gaze. Basically, that how we interpret things, how we view things, are through either two lenses, the female gaze or the male gaze, which is our eyes are drawn to this kind of Freudian sexual gratification kind of thing. Originally, it was not actually dependent. It was not any gendered anything. It was actually very specifically that the gender of attraction or whatever thing is actually going to be focused more onto the sexual object, basically. That whatever we wrote on paper and film and et cetera, that we will focus on the things we enjoy. We enjoy pleasure. We enjoy things.
My playboy is so hot. That's the criticism on that, where people will joke about that. It's like whether you find your playboy sexually attractive or charismatic, you're picking them for a reason. Or even because you think that they're somehow unusual or even horrible looking, that there's something going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you have a lot of these weird things just happening. That's kind of a huge aspect of the male gaze, female gaze, whatever, that we go through things that attract us. And it kind of goes into fan fiction a little bit. Like, fan fiction is kind of the same way, where you do have these basically representations of how we view things, how we enjoy things, or whatever, and how gaze operates. And so, how Mulvey describes it is that there are kind of two ways we view entertainment, three ways actually. There's the masochistic, there's the sadistic, and there is the sadomasochistic. Masochistic is that we, as the audience, do not have control. We are receiving pleasure, but we are not taking pleasure. We are enjoying things, we are taking things, and that's where the idea of the gaze comes from. It's what makes us happy, what makes us enjoy things. Whether it's, and it could be anything. It could be even horror and fear and these things, because it's letting us enjoy our emotions and letting us enjoy these concepts and these things in front of us. So, when Mulvey talks about that, then there's the sadistic, which is more video games, which we are in control. We are basically impeding pleasure. We're pushing against it instead of receiving it. It's actually why one of my crazy professors hates video games, because of that sadistic quality that you are in control of the story instead of taking in the story. But then there's sadomasochistic, which I argue is what video games, RPing, fan fiction, all these things are, which is that you are both receiving and that you're both enjoying. Because you are in control of the character, you are creating, you are doing things, and you are taking pleasure from action, while you are also taking pleasure from reading. It's basically that the sadistic is the active, is the more action-y prone thing, while masochism is enjoying things, taking things, having things happen to you. And so that's a huge, huge, huge aspect of kind of how I view RPing right now. It's just because you are basically reacting to another person, and you're working as a team in this kind of weird sadomasochistic, masochistic kind of like boom. And that's kind of yin and yang thing. And so that's kind of how I'm framing a lot of when I'm talking about philosophy, because I'm going to talk about a lot of weird things. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm going to get into transhumanism. I'm going to get into the simulacra. I'm going into, yeah, I already said I'm getting into Arendt. And yeah, and kind of human conditioning, because that also comes into a lot of it. And so how does this affect storytelling? H plus.
Dino's thrilled.
That's the symbol for transhumanism.
Oh, nice. Okay, but yes, transhumanism, God in the Machine. Yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah, we're gonna get into God in the Machine. We're gonna get into. Oh God, what's the concept I was thinking of? It's not solid. No, the singularity. That's the one. Well, that's part of transhumanism, singularity. But yeah, we're gonna get into the whole notion of what God. We might even get to a little bit of what a concept of what God is, but that's gonna be fun. Okay, but that's getting ahead of myself. So, how does that affect storytelling? So, storytelling is kind of an ancient art. If you don't know that, we've been storytelling since as long as we've been building weapons. Because there's literally 3 professions that'll never die: the storyteller, the prostitute, and the soldier. Like, that's kind of how things work. There's always stories, there's always oral tradition, there's always history. And history in itself is a story. Basically, everything is a story. And you can even look at history as how we even make history. How many... Okay, I'm going to get into a little bit of a rant. I'm not going to get all of it, but I'm going to get into it because she talks about this concept of heroism. That we create heroes. We have a habit of creating national identities out of heroes. That we have a habit of creating idolizations, of creating national identities and concepts and all these things from forming these heroic figures and creating myths about them. We basically...
It's pretty obvious here with the U.S., especially with our presidents.
Oh, God, no,
and it's so many myths about like apple trees and other stuff like that. Where
oh no, it's everything. Frederick the Great has 1 billion of them. Catherine the Great has 1 billion of them. Queen Elizabeth. Every time you have a great leader of a nation, the whole concept of nationalism brings out the hero myth. That's always going to happen. You're always going to have a villain. You're always going to have a hero. And it's always the leader or some other figure of the country that is doing it, the national hero, whatever. You're always going to have these antagonistic and protagonistic forces always in combat. That's kind of how national myth building works. So, when you have a national myth or a national creation, you kind of also follow this hero's journey. They have to combat, they have to fight, they have to go these things. Abraham Lincoln in the Senate against all the Southern congressmen. You have Napoleon at Waterloo. You have all of these different figures. They're always going to have these stories. They're always going to have these myths. They're just going to pile up and up and up and up on them. And then, boom, and then you start creating stories. And then you start creating what I like to call XP. No, they're XPs, but it's effigy. Effigy is a lot better word, actually. So you have this idea of effigy, which is that you start taking traits, ideas, and other things from myths, ideas, stories, legends. You start placing them upon reality, or reality begins to affect the fiction. So, a great example of this is 1984, where Emmanuel Goldstein is basically a huge, giant XP of... Or, actually, most of Orwell's work, there's usually an XP of Trotsky. Let's just be a little real about that. Or you have Sylvia Plath. Most of her characters are based off people she knew in real life. John Green, all of these Stephanie Meyer. A lot of these people are based off of people we see and interact with. And that's the thing with characters. Different people leave impressions on us, and then we create that into characters. And that comes back to that sadomasochistic quality that comes into RPing. We like to take, but we like also to receive, and it's this very kind of mental gratification, because this is all very what's the word for Freudian? 3 out of college, so I'm forgetting every word. Yeah, I totally know this word and just blanking on it. The whole concept of Freudian psychology. But basically, yeah, you have all of these things. Psychoanalysis. Why was I thinking that was with an N? Okay, and that's the basis of modern psychoanalysis, which is in theaters, and basically it's all about film studies now, modern psychoanalysis. That the creator, that the author is building stories and building ideas based on their own personal myths and ideas and legends and moving them. And this is where I want to get into kind of idea of symbol. I'm going to talk a little bit more about symbol later, because that's the simulacra. That is completely and utterly the whole concept of the simulacra and the matrix, which is that everything is a symbol. But in history, we have shared symbols, we have shared ideas, which are really interesting, in fact. For example, color theory. Colors usually create a certain mood, myth, or whatever. People like to say sometimes the drapes are blue, but even then when we were just thinking the drapes are blue, subconsciously, a lot of colors still elicit a kind of emotion, especially in a room, especially if you're in a room. Yellow's a happy, cheery, happy color, even if it is just painting a drape. Because usually people will pick drapes and put them in yellow because they're happy in the room, and thus even if the author is like, I just want drapes in my room because whatever, they're yellow, they still hook that from the fact that a lot of people put yellow drapes in the room because it makes people happy. There's not really much of an explanation of it other than yellow is a very happy color. And then you have black. Black is like the prototypical horror. You have the black dog, the black cat. You have the color of night being fear, darkness, which is laying on the primal fear of not being able to see shit, which is just kind of human nature. Yeah, you have all these things that come into story building as well, because we have these predepositions that come from various cultures, and they appear always. Like every culture has a freaking flood myth. Like I don't know how many people knew that every culture has a flood myth. It's one of the freakiest things ever. It's not like Alien.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Every culture has a flood myth.
Okay.
Like you have certain things that just appear constantly through every civilization because certain things just bring certain images, and that's how universal storytelling comes into being. And that's how the best storytellings are the ones that basically can reach the biggest audience. That's here the monomyth. It's not the only story, but it's the most effective because it's so prevalent in everything. The Tale of Kenji, the Gilgamesh, all that. The Ulster Cycle, Anna Karenina, Russian literature, Johnny B. Good. Like all of these different things just span through culture, and it will always kind of resonate the same way, and it's very, very cool. And so, yeah, that's kind of my rundown on my quick little rundown, 30, 40 minutes, about Campbell and psychoanalysis. So, because next week we're going to be talking about the simulacra, which is all about this idea of that these symbols and these things are so prevalent in society that we create stories and legends and ideas straight out of them. So, that's kind of it. Any questions?
Not really.
Yeah, no, that was a lot. I'm sorry. It's a lot. It's heavy. It's dense, but...
Well, you can always give us cliff notes on some of the different writers and links to stuff in your teacher's lounge.
I could always... Yeah, no, it's... There is so much out there. I basically just went into a small, quick... Those little cliff notes on every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because then building up for the next couple classes where I'm just going to go deeper into simulacra, feminism.
Because there's also like little things too, like Tolkien's Second Earth or Second World, where he talks about that. You've heard about that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lingua Franca, but that's Tower of Babel. That's another.
Yeah. So it's like this is a massive subject. So this is a nice little intro to to what we're going to have
This is an
various
intro to
different
philosophy.
classes.
What this is an intro to philosophy course using RPing and story building as kind of like the same, because RPing is just collaborative fiction, like at the heart of it. So yeah, it's sadomasochistic. So yeah, but I didn't even get into the idea of control. That's another, well, that's free will. But okay, is that everyone good? Everyone solid?
Yep. Hmm.
All right, then.
I am.
Yeah, it's really quick and easy to do those kind of things. All right, good. I'm glad.